Billionaire pretended to be drunk. What his internship student did next made him fall in love. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She could spot a lie from across a crowded room, but this one was different. The 42nd floor of Cross Holdings buzzed with the kind of energy that only came after 5 consecutive quarters of record-breaking profits. Imani Brooks pressed her back against the marble wall, clutching a stack of quarterly reports that seemed to weigh more than her entire future. The company's annual celebration was in full swing, and she felt like an intruder watching through glass. "Another champagne, Miss Brooks." She turned to find Charles Whitmore, the silver-haired VP of Operations, extending a crystal flute toward her. His smile was practiced, the kind that came with decades of corporate networking. "Thank you, but I'm still working on this one," Imani replied, lifting her barely touched glass. The truth was, she couldn't afford to let her guard down. Not here. Not when every conversation could determine whether her internship turned into something real or just another line on her resume. The Manhattan skyline sparkled through floor-to-ceiling windows, but Imani's attention was drawn to the center of the room. There he was, Damien Cross. Even from 30 feet away, his presence commanded attention. At 40, he moved through the crowd with the confidence of a man who'd never had to question his place in the world. Dark hair perfectly styled, charcoal suit tailored to perfection, and those steel-gray eyes that seemed to catalogue every person, every detail, every potential threat. "Impressive, isn't he?" Charles followed her gaze. "Built this empire from nothing. His father left him with more debt than assets, but look at him now." Imani nodded politely, though she'd already memorized every detail of Damien's rise in the business journals. What fascinated her wasn't his success. It was the way he held himself apart from it all. Even surrounded by admirers, he seemed alone. "Excuse me," she murmured, spotting an abandoned coffee cup on a side table. Always working, always useful. That was her strategy for survival here. As she collected discarded glasses and straightened chairs, Imani noticed the subtle shift in the room's energy. Damien had accepted a glass of wine from his assistant, Isabella, and was engaging more freely with the crowd. His laugh rang out over the jazz music, and several executives moved closer, like moths drawn to flame. But something felt wrong. Imani paused in her cleaning, studying him more carefully. His posture was relaxed, his speech slightly slower, but his eyes were still sharp, still calculating. She watched as he swayed slightly while talking to the head of marketing, saw how carefully he controlled each seemingly careless gesture. "He's not drunk," she realized. "He's performing." "Imani, right?" She startled, turning to find Connor Holbrook, one of the junior executives she'd assisted with presentations. His cologne was overwhelming, and his smile held an edge she didn't like. "Yes, sir. Can I help you with anything?" "Just wondering if you're enjoying the party. You seem a bit observant." His gaze lingered on her face, then drifted lower. "Most interns just drink the free champagne and try to network. I prefer to stay focused," she replied, stepping back slightly. Connor moved closer. "Focused on what? Damien Cross?" He chuckled. "Trust me, sweetheart. Guys like him don't notice girls like—" "Connor." Damien's voice cut through the conversation like ice. Neither of them had heard him approach. "I believe your wife is looking for you by the bar." Connor's face flushed red, but he managed a weak smile. "Of course, excuse me." As Connor hurried away, Imani found herself alone with the man she'd been watching all evening. Up close, she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the way his jaw tightened when he thought no one was looking. The scent of his cologne was subtle but intoxicating. Cedar and something darker. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did." His voice was steady, controlled. Not the voice of a man who'd been drinking for the past hour. "Are you enjoying the party, Miss Brooks?" The fact that he knew her name sent a flutter through her chest. "It's educational." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Educational. I like that." He swayed slightly, catching himself against the wall with practiced ease. "Perhaps you could help me with some education of my own." "Sir, I seem to have had a bit too much wine." The words were carefully slurred, but his eyes remained locked on hers. "Would you mind helping me to my car? I'd hate to make a scene." Imani glanced around the room. Several people were watching them now, whispers starting to spread. She looked back at Damien, seeing something in his expression that made her heart skip. Vulnerability, yes, but also a test. He was waiting to see what she would do. "Of course," she said, setting down her glass. "Let me get your coat." As they made their way through the crowd, Damien leaning slightly on her arm for show, Imani felt the weight of every stare, every whispered comment. She was nobody, a 24-year-old intern from Brooklyn who'd scraped together enough for one good suit. And yet somehow she was the one walking beside the most powerful man in the building. The elevator ride to the parking garage was silent, except for the soft hum of machinery and Damien's carefully controlled breathing. When the doors opened, he straightened immediately, all pretense falling away. "You knew," he said simply. It wasn't a question, but Imani answered anyway. "Yes. Why didn't you expose me? Would have been quite the story for Monday morning coffee." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the expensive suit, past the reputation, past the walls he'd built around himself, because everyone deserves the right to be human. The parking garage was dimly lit, their footsteps echoing off concrete. Damien's driver waited by a sleek black sedan, but he made no move to get in. Instead, he turned to face her fully. "You have no idea what you've done tonight, do you?" His voice was soft, almost wonderstruck. Before she could ask what he meant, he was in the car, and she was standing alone in the garage, watching taillights disappear into the New York night. But as she waited for her own ride, a yellow taxi that would take her back to her tiny studio apartment, Imani couldn't shake the feeling that everything had just changed, and she had no idea how dangerous that change would be. What would you have done in Imani's place? Would you have exposed his act to gain advantage, or protected his secret, knowing it could change everything? Sometimes the choices we make in a single moment define our entire future, and Imani just made hers. The weekend had felt like a lifetime, but Monday morning arrived with the force of a sledgehammer. Imani's alarm buzzed at 5:47 a.m., but she'd been awake since 4, staring at the water stain on her studio apartment's ceiling and replaying Friday night frame by frame. The way Damien's voice had dropped when he said, "You have no idea what you've done tonight," the intensity in his steel-grey eyes, the careful way he'd orchestrated his own vulnerability. What had she done? The subway ride to Manhattan felt different somehow. Every businessman in a tailored suit reminded her of him. Every reflection in the train windows showed her the same question. Had she made the biggest mistake of her career, or saved it? Cross Holdings' lobby buzzed with its usual Monday energy. Imani badged in at 7:15 a.m., 45 minutes before her required start time. Being early was armor. It meant no one could question her dedication or find fault with her work ethic. Well, look who's famous." Imani turned to find Dexter Vance, a fellow intern who'd started the same week she had. His smile was sharp, predatory. Unlike her, Dexter came from money. His father was some hotshot attorney in Connecticut, and he never let anyone forget it. "What are you talking about?" She pressed the elevator button, hoping to escape this conversation before it began. "Oh, come on. Don't play dumb." Dexter stepped closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Half the company saw you playing nursemaid to Damien Cross on Friday. Rumor mill's already spinning." The elevator doors opened, and Imani stepped inside, but Dexter followed. "What rumors? Take your pick. You're sleeping with him. You're blackmailing him. You drugged his wine." Dexter's grin widened. "Personally, I think you're just smarter than the rest of us gave you credit for. Getting close to power by any means necessary. I respect that." It wasn't like that. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Sure it wasn't. The elevator stopped at the 38th floor, Dexter's department. As he stepped out, he turned back. "Just remember, Imani, when you climb that high that fast, the fall hurts a lot more." The doors closed, leaving her alone with her reflection and a growing sense of dread. The 40th floor seemed different when she arrived. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as she passed. Keyboards fell silent. Even Penelope Ashford, the head of human resources who usually greeted everyone with aggressive cheerfulness, gave her a tight-lipped nod that felt more like a warning. Imani's desk was in the corner of the intern bullpen, squeezed between filing cabinets and a perpetually broken printer. She'd always been invisible here, just another face in a sea of eager young professionals hoping to prove themselves worthy. But today, invisibility felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. "Miss Brooks." The voice made her spine straighten instinctively. She turned to find Isabella Toretti, Damien's executive assistant, standing beside her desk. Isabella was everything Imani wasn't: polished, connected, and utterly confident in her place within the company hierarchy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect chignon, and her burgundy suit probably cost more than Imani's monthly rent. "Mr. Cross would like to see you in his office. Now." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Around them, the entire floor had gone completely silent. 30 pairs of eyes watched as Imani saved her work, closed her laptop, and followed Isabella toward the executive wing. The walk felt endless, past the conference rooms where million-dollar deals were made, past the offices of vice presidents who controlled entire divisions, past the carefully curated art that spoke of wealth so old and established it didn't need to announce itself. Isabella's heels clicked against marble with military precision. "A word of advice," she said without looking back. "Mr. Cross values directness above all else. Don't waste his time with explanations he hasn't asked for." They stopped outside a set of double doors, mahogany imposing, with Damien's name etched in gold letters that seemed to mock her audacity. Isabella knocked once, waited for a response, then opened the door. "Miss Brooks," as requested. Damien's office was a study in controlled power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Central Park. The furniture was minimalist but expensive, everything designed to remind visitors exactly where they stood in the hierarchy. Behind a desk that could have served as a landing strip for small aircraft sat the man who'd occupied her thoughts all weekend. He looked different in daylight. The vulnerability she'd glimpsed Friday night was gone, replaced by the armor of absolute authority. His suit was navy today, perfectly pressed. His hair was styled with mathematical precision. When he looked up from the document he'd been reviewing, his expression was unreadable. "Close the door, Isabella, and hold my calls." The soft click of the door closing felt like a coffin lid dropping. Imani stood in the center of the vast office, her hands clasped behind her back, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "Sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs across from his desk. She sat, back straight, ankles crossed, professional, composed. Everything her mother had taught her about surviving in spaces where she wasn't wanted. Damien studied her for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Do you know why you're here, Miss Brooks? I assume it's about Friday night." "Indeed." He stood, moving to the windows. With his back to her, his voice took on a different quality, less commanding, more contemplative. "I've been in business for 18 years, built this company from nothing. In that time, I've learned to read people quickly and accurately. It's a survival skill in this world." He turned back to face her. "You intrigue me." The words hung between them, loaded with implications she wasn't sure she wanted to understand. "Sir, Friday night, I gave you an opportunity, a chance to gain leverage over me that could have advanced your career considerably. Instead, you chose discretion, loyalty even." He moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk. "Why?" The question she'd been dreading. Imani took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "Because power without humanity is just cruelty, and you didn't seem cruel." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or something deeper. "Most people in your position would have seen an opportunity for advancement. I'm not most people." "No," he said quietly, "you're not." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Outside, the city hummed with the energy of 8 million people pursuing their dreams and ambitions. Inside this office, time seemed suspended. "I have a proposition for you," Damien said finally. Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. "What kind of proposition?" "I need someone I can trust, someone who sees beyond the title, the money, the reputation." He paused, his gaze intense. "Someone who would help a drunk stranger in a parking garage, even when it could cost them everything." "What are you asking?" "Be my personal assistant. Isabella is being promoted to Director of Executive Operations. The position comes with a significant salary increase, full benefits, and—" He smiled, and for a moment she glimpsed the man beneath the CEO. "The chance to learn from someone who appreciates loyalty above ambition." The offer hit her like a physical blow. Personal assistant to Damien Cross. It was beyond anything she'd dared to dream, but something in his tone, something in the way he watched her reaction, made her wonder if there was more to this offer than professional advancement. "When would you need an answer?" "Now." His eyes never left hers. "Because trust, Miss Brooks, is not something I offer twice." And in that moment, Imani realized she was standing at the edge of a cliff, with no way to know if taking the leap would lead to flight or freefall. Sometimes saying yes to one thing means saying goodbye to everything else you thought you knew about yourself. The word escaped Imani's lips before her brain could catch up with her heart. "Yes." Damien's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them, a subtle electricity that made her skin tingle. "Good." Isabella will brief you on your new responsibilities this afternoon. You start tomorrow. Just like that? Miss Brooks, when I make a decision, I don't waste time with bureaucratic delays. He returned to his desk, his fingers already reaching for the next document in his pile. Your salary will be triple what you're currently earning. Isabella has prepared your new employment contract. Triple. The number hit her like a physical blow. She could pay off her student loans, move out of that studio apartment with the leaking ceiling, maybe even help her mother with the medical bills that had been piling up since her father's heart attack. But something in Damien's dismissive tone rankled her. What if I have questions? He looked up, one eyebrow raised. Such as? Why me, really? She leaned forward slightly, her professional mask slipping. You could have anyone. Someone with experience, connections, an MBA from Harvard. What do you actually want from me? For a moment the mask slipped from his face too. She saw something raw there, almost vulnerable. Because, Miss Brooks, I'm tired of people who want something from me. You helped me Friday night without expecting anything in return. Do you have any idea how rare that is? The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the calculated CEO speaking. This was the man who'd stood alone in a parking garage, wondering if anyone would choose kindness over ambition. And if I disappoint you, then you'll join a very long list. The walls were back up, his voice professional once more. But somehow, I don't think you will. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. Word of her promotion had spread through the building like wildfire, and the reactions ranged from envious congratulations to barely concealed hostility. During lunch, she found herself alone in the employee cafeteria, mechanically eating a sandwich while processing the seismic shift her life had just taken. The familiar chatter of her fellow interns felt distant now, like voices from another world. Mind if I sit? She looked up to find Wesley Hartwell, one of the senior analysts from the 36th floor. She'd noticed him before, tall, bookish, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Unlike most of the men here, he'd never made her feel like she had to prove her right to exist in their space. Please, she gestured to the empty chair across from her. Wesley settled himself with careful precision, adjusting his navy tie before speaking. Congratulations are in order, I hear. Thank you. She waited for the inevitable follow-up question, the probing for gossip or scandal. Instead, he surprised her. My first day as Damien's analyst, I spilled coffee on a $50 million contract, right in front of the Japanese investors. He smiled at the memory. I was certain I'd be fired within the hour. What happened? He looked at me, looked at the stain, then told our guests that sometimes the best deals need a little character. Wesley's expression grew serious. He could have humiliated me. Instead, he protected my dignity in front of people whose respect I needed. That was 3 years ago. Imani studied his face, searching for hidden meaning. Why are you telling me this? Because people are going to try to poison your opinion of him. They'll say he's ruthless, cold, that he uses people. Wesley leaned forward slightly. Some of that is true, but there's more to him than the reputation. Don't let them take that knowledge away from you before you discover it yourself. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving her with more questions than answers. At 4 p.m. sharp, Isabella appeared at her desk with a leather portfolio and the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Your new office is being prepared, but we can start the transition process now. Isabella's voice was professionally cordial, but Imani caught the subtle undertone of resentment. These are Mr. Cross's preferences for meetings, travel, communications, and personal matters. The portfolio was thick, detailed, and slightly intimidating. Imani flipped through pages of dietary restrictions, preferred airlines, emergency contacts, and what appeared to be a comprehensive list of people who were never to be put through to Damien under any circumstances. This seems extensive. Mr. Cross values efficiency above all else. Every minute of his day is accounted for, every decision optimized. Isabella's manicured fingers drummed against the desk. He doesn't tolerate mistakes, and he certainly doesn't tolerate personal drama interfering with business. The warning was clear. Imani looked up to meet Isabella's gaze directly. Is there something specific you think I should know? Just that this position requires absolute discretion and unwavering loyalty. Mr. Cross's trust is not easily earned, and once lost, it's never recovered. Isabella's smile became razor-sharp. I'd hate to see you waste such an unexpected opportunity. After Isabella left, Imani sat alone with the portfolio, the weight of her new reality settling over her like a heavy coat. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How was your day, baby? Still loving that internship?" She stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Everything's changing, Mom. I'll call you tonight." At 6:30 p.m., when most of the office had emptied out, Imani found herself walking past Damien's office. The door was slightly ajar, and she could see him inside, still working. His jacket was draped over his chair, his sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked tired, genuinely tired, not the performed exhaustion she'd witnessed Friday night. Without fully deciding to do it, she knocked softly on the doorframe. "Come in." She stepped inside, suddenly uncertain. "I wanted to thank you." "For the opportunity." He looked up from his computer, his expression unreadable. "Don't thank me yet. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into." "Then tell me." The question hung in the air between them. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. "This job will consume your life, Miss Brooks. Early mornings, late nights, constant availability. You'll know more about my schedule than I do, more about my business than some of my vice presidents." He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. "And people will assume things about why you're here that have nothing to do with your qualifications. Let them assume. It doesn't bother you. The whispers, the speculation." Imani thought of her mother, working double shifts as a nurse to keep their family afloat. Of her father, whose pride had been crushed along with his heart when the factory closed. Of every door that had been slammed in her face because she didn't have the right connections, the right background, the right everything. "I've been dealing with people's assumptions about me my entire life," she said quietly. "At least now I'm getting paid well for the privilege." Something shifted in Damien's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Fair enough." He glanced at his watch. "It's getting late. You should go home, get some rest. Tomorrow will be intense." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Mr. Cross?" "Yes?" "That man who helped you Friday night, the one who saw you as human instead of just a title. He's still here. Don't forget that." As she walked toward the elevator, she heard him call her name one last time. Imani, not Miss Brooks. Her first name, spoken in his voice, sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Welcome to the deep end." And as the elevator doors closed, she realized she was no longer the same person who'd walked into this building that morning. For better or worse, there was no going back. Hell, she discovered, could be beautifully decorated and come with excellent benefits. Imani's new office was a revelation in glass and chrome, positioned strategically between Damien's executive suite and the main conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the Hudson River, and her desk, real mahogany, not the particle board she'd grown accustomed to, gleamed under carefully positioned lighting. But the beauty couldn't mask the suffocating weight of expectation that pressed down on her shoulders as she settled into her new leather chair at exactly 7 a.m. Her first task seemed simple enough: organize Damien's calendar for the next 2 weeks. What Isabella hadn't mentioned was that his schedule resembled a Tetris game designed by a sadist. Back-to-back meetings with no transition time, overlapping conference calls, and travel arrangements that defied the laws of physics. "Good morning, Miss Brooks." She looked up to find Damien standing in her doorway, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her old car. His tie was perfectly knotted, his hair styled with mathematical precision, and his expression was the carefully neutral mask she was beginning to recognize as his armor. "Good morning, Mr. Cross. I was just reviewing—" "Cancel my 10 a.m. with the Singapore investors. Move the quarterly review to 2 p.m. and push back the Goldman Sachs call to Thursday." He spoke rapidly, already moving toward his office. "Oh, and get me Lysander Thorne from Meridian Holdings on the line. Tell him it's urgent." The door closed behind him before she could ask who Lysander Thorne was, or how urgent was urgent. Imani stared at her computer screen, panic rising in her throat. Isabella's detailed notes suddenly seemed woefully inadequate. Her phone rang. "Damien Cross's office, this is Imani." Finally, someone knew. The voice was warm, slightly accented. British, maybe. "Lysander Thorne here. Damien called me yesterday about some acquisition nonsense. Is the magnificent bastard available?" Despite her stress, Imani found herself smiling. "He's in his office, Mr. Thorne. Let me put you through." "Brilliant. And love, do yourself a favor. Don't let him work you to death the first week. He's been through 4 assistants in 2 years. Not because he's difficult, mind you, but because he forgets that mortals need things like sleep and food." Before she could respond, she was transferring the call and diving back into the scheduling chaos. By 9:30 a.m., she'd managed to untangle most of the conflicts, but her hands were shaking from caffeine and adrenaline. Rough morning? She looked up to find Dexter Vance leaning against her doorframe, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. Today he wore a suit that screamed family money, perfectly tailored with a watch that probably cost more than she used to make in 6 months. "Just adjusting to the new pace," she replied carefully. "I bet." His gaze swept over her office with obvious envy. "Nice upgrade. Must be exhausting keeping up with all his demands." The way he said demands made her skin crawl. "Was there something you needed, Dexter?" "Actually, yes." He stepped into her office, closing the door behind him. "I wanted to give you some friendly advice about navigating the politics up here." "I'm listening." "Damian Cross is brilliant. I'll give him that. But he's also dangerous. He doesn't just want your professional loyalty. He wants your complete devotion. And when you can't give him that anymore," Dexter shrugged, "well, let's just say his previous assistants didn't leave with glowing recommendations." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I like you, Imani. We started here together, remember? I'd hate to see you crash and burn because you got in over your head." He moved closer to her desk. "If you ever need an ally up here, someone who understands how this world really works. I appreciate the concern, but I'm fine." "Are you?" His eyes glittered with something cold. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're one mistake away from being yesterday's news." The door opened without warning, and Damian stepped out of his office. His gaze moved from Imani to Dexter, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Mr. Vance, I wasn't aware you had business on this floor." Dexter's confident facade cracked slightly. "Just welcoming Miss Brooks to the executive level, sir. Making sure she has everything she needs." "How thoughtful." Damian's voice could have frozen champagne. "I'm sure Miss Brooks appreciates your concern, but I believe you have reports due to Sterling and Associates this morning." It wasn't a suggestion. Dexter's face flushed red, but he managed a tight smile. "Of course. Good luck, Imani. You'll need it." After he left, the silence stretched uncomfortably. Damian's expression was unreadable, but Imani could sense the tension radiating from him. What did he want? His voice was deceptively casual. "To warn me about you, apparently." Damian's eyebrows rose slightly. "And what exactly did he warn you about?" Imani considered lying, softening the edges of Dexter's words, but something about Damian's direct gaze made her choose honesty instead. "That you're dangerous, that you demand complete devotion, that your previous assistants didn't end well." "And what do you think about that?" She met his eyes steadily. "I think Dexter Vance is more interested in undermining me than protecting me, and I think if you were really as dangerous as he claims, you wouldn't be asking me what I think." Something shifted in Damian's expression, surprise maybe or approval. "You're learning to read this place quickly." "I'm a fast study." "Good. Because we have lunch with Cordelia Ashworth from Venture Dynamics in 30 minutes, and she eats junior executives for breakfast. What should I know about her?" "She's brilliant, ruthless, and she'll try to intimidate you within the first 5 minutes of meeting you." Damian straightened his tie, that familiar armor sliding back into place. "Don't let her. She respects strength, not deference." As they prepared to leave, Imani caught her reflection in the elevator's polished doors. Designer suit, perfect posture, confident expression. She looked like she belonged here, but beneath the surface she felt like an imposter playing a role she wasn't sure she understood. The restaurant was the kind of place where meals cost more than most people's weekly salary, and the waitstaff moved with choreographed precision. Cordelia Ashworth was already seated when they arrived, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, sharp eyes, and the bearing of someone who'd clawed her way to the top and enjoyed the view. "Damian." She rose to greet them, her smile all teeth and calculation. "And this must be the famous new assistant I've been hearing about." "Cordelia, meet Imani Brooks." "Imani, Cordelia Ashworth." Cordelia's handshake was firm, her gaze assessing. "So young, so fresh." The words weren't quite an insult, but they weren't a compliment either. "Tell me, dear, what's your background? Harvard, Wharton? Or are you one of those charming self-made success stories?" The trap was expertly laid. Any answer would reveal her as either privileged or inadequate. Imani smiled, channeling every lesson her mother had taught her about surviving in hostile territory. "Brooklyn College, actually. Business and Communications double major. Graduated summa cum laude." She met Cordelia's gaze directly. "I find that hunger and talent often compensate for pedigree." Cordelia's smile became genuine for the first time. "Indeed they do. I like her, Damian. She has spine." The lunch proceeded more smoothly after that, but Imani remained hyper-aware of every word, every gesture, every subtle power play happening beneath the surface of polite conversation. By the time they returned to the office, her head was pounding and her feet ached in her new heels. "You did well," Damien said as they entered the elevator. "Cordelia doesn't compliment easily." "Thank you." She leaned against the elevator wall, suddenly exhausted. "Is it always like this? The constant performance, the testing? At this level?" "Yes." His voice was softer now, less commanding. "But you handle it better than most. You don't try to be someone you're not. You just become the best version of who you are." The elevator stopped at their floor, but neither of them moved immediately. In the enclosed space, Imani became acutely aware of his proximity, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his jacket fit across his broad shoulders. "Damien?" She used his first name without thinking, then caught herself. "I mean, Mr. Cross, Damien is fine when we're alone." The simple permission felt strangely intimate. "Why did you really give me this job?" He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because in a world full of people who want to use me, you saw me as human." He looked at her then, and she saw past the CEO, past the billion-dollar empire, to the man who'd stood vulnerable in a parking garage. "And because I'm tired of being alone at the top." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them was quite ready to cross. The most dangerous conversations always happened when the rest of the world had gone to sleep. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and Imani was still at her desk, cross-referencing quarterly projections with market analysis reports that might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit. The 42nd floor was tomb-quiet, save for the distant hum of the building's ventilation system and the occasional ping of her computer, receiving another urgent email. She'd been Damien's assistant for 2 weeks now, and the learning curve felt less like a hill and more like a vertical cliff face. Every day brought new challenges, new tests, new opportunities to either prove herself or spectacular fail in front of people whose approval could make or break careers. "You're still here." She looked up to find Damien standing in his office doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking as tired as she felt. His usually perfect hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his fingers through it, and there was something vulnerable about seeing him this way. Less CEO, more human. "So are you," she replied, saving her work and leaning back in her chair. Her feet ached in her heels, and she could feel a headache building behind her eyes. "I live here some days." He moved to her desk, perching on the edge with casual familiarity. "But you don't have to. This job comes with long hours, but I don't expect you to match my insomnia. I want to get it right." "You are getting it right." His voice was softer now, the commanding tone he used in meetings replaced by something gentler. "The Singapore deal closed this morning because you caught that error in the subsidiary documentation. Cordelia specifically asked for you to be included in the Venture Dynamics merger discussions, and Lysander told me you're the first assistant who's managed to keep his calls under 10 minutes. Despite her exhaustion, Imani smiled. "He talks a lot. He talks a lot, because most people let him. You don't." Damien studied her face in the soft light from her desk lamp. "You're not afraid of powerful people. That's rare. Maybe I'm just too tired to be afraid anymore." He laughed, a real laugh, not the calculated chuckle he used in board meetings. The sound sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "Come on, I'm calling you a car. I can take the subway." "Imani." Her name on his lips still sent a small shiver down her spine. "It's almost 10 o'clock. You're exhausted. You're wearing heels that were clearly designed by someone who's never had to walk more than 10 feet, and you've been running on coffee and determination for the past 14 hours. I'm calling you a car." She wanted to argue, to insist on her independence, but the fight had gone out of her. "Thank you." While they waited for the car, Damien moved to the windows overlooking the city. Manhattan sparkled below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, millions of dreams being pursued in the darkness. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like?" His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. "What?" "Being normal, having a regular job, regular hours, going home to someone who doesn't know or care about quarterly earnings or hostile takeovers." He glanced at her, something wistful in his expression. "Someone who just wants to know how your day was." The question caught her off guard. This wasn't the commanding CEO or even the vulnerable man from the parking garage. This was someone else entirely. Someone lonely. Someone questioning the choices that had brought him to the top of the world, but left him isolated there. "Is that what you want?" "I thought I wanted power, control, the ability to shape outcomes, to win. He was quiet for a long moment. But power is lonely, Imani, and winning loses its appeal when there's no one to celebrate with. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from the car service. "Your car is here," she said softly. They rode the elevator down in comfortable silence, but as they reached the lobby, Damien caught her arm gently. "Have dinner with me." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them was quite ready to examine. Damien, not a business dinner, not networking or deal-making or any of the corporate theater we perform every day. His grey eyes were intense, searching her face. Just dinner. Two people who've spent too many hours in this building, sharing a meal and conversation that has nothing to do with profit margins. Every rational part of her brain screamed warnings. He was her boss. This could complicate everything. She'd worked too hard to get here to risk it all on whatever was happening between them. But looking at him, really looking at him, she saw past the power and prestige to the man who'd confessed to being tired of being alone, and she realized she was tired of being alone too. Okay. His smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. Tomorrow night? Tomorrow night. The car ride to her apartment passed in a blur of city lights and racing thoughts. What was she doing? What did this mean? And why did the thought of sitting across from Damien Cross in a restaurant, talking about anything other than business, make her feel like she was standing on the edge of something both wonderful and terrifying? Her phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for everything, for seeing me, for staying late, for saying yes. D." She stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Thank you for asking. Sleep well." His response came immediately. "I will now." The next day brought its own chaos. The markets were volatile, two major deals were threatening to fall through, and Quintessa Rivers from legal was breathing down everyone's neck about compliance issues that made Imani's head spin. But underneath the professional urgency, she was hyper-aware of every interaction with Damien, the way his fingers brushed hers when he handed her documents, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention. At 3 p.m. her phone rang with an internal call. Imani Brooks. "Miss Brooks, this is Octavia Sterling from Human Resources." The voice was crisp, professional, with an undertone that made Imani's stomach clench. "I need to see you in my office, immediately." The HR department was on the 35th floor, a sterile environment of beige walls and motivational posters that fooled no one about the serious business conducted there. Octavia Sterling was a woman in her 40s with steel-grey hair and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. "Please sit." Octavia gestured to a chair across from her desk. "I'll get straight to the point. There have been concerns raised about your relationship with Mr. Cross." Imani felt ice form in her veins. What kind of concerns? The kind that could create legal liabilities for this company. Octavia opened a folder on her desk. "Multiple employees have reported inappropriate interactions between you and Mr. Cross. Extended private meetings, personal conversations, preferential treatment. I'm his personal assistant. Private meetings and personal conversations are part of my job description." "Are dinner invitations part of your job description, Miss Brooks?" The question hit like a physical blow. Someone had been watching, listening, reporting. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Octavia's smile was razor-sharp. "Let me be very clear. Cross Holdings has a zero-tolerance policy regarding romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates. Any violation of this policy results in immediate termination. There is no romantic relationship." "Good. Then you won't mind declining any future social invitations from Mr. Cross. And Miss Brooks?" Octavia closed the folder with a snap. "Remember that discretion is a valuable quality in an assistant, but indiscretion can be career-ending." As Imani walked back to the elevator, her hands were shaking. Someone was watching them, documenting their interactions, building a case against her. But who and why? The elevator doors opened to reveal Dexter Vance, that familiar smirk playing at his lips. "Rough afternoon?" he asked, stepping aside to let her enter. She didn't respond, but as the elevator rose toward the executive floor, she caught his reflection in the polished doors. He was watching her with the satisfaction of someone who'd just played a winning hand, and suddenly she realized the game she'd been playing had rules she'd never been told. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is tell someone the truth that could destroy everything. Imani stood outside Damien's office at 6:30 p.m., her hand hovering over the door handle. Through the frosted glass, she could see his silhouette bent over paperwork, probably reviewing the acquisition documents that had consumed his afternoon. In 30 minutes, they were supposed to meet for dinner, their first real moment together outside the suffocating confines of corporate expectation. But Octavia Sterling's words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. Zero-tolerance policy. Immediate termination. Career ending. She knocked softly and entered without waiting for permission. Damien looked up, his expression shifting from business focus to something warmer, more personal. Ready to escape this place? His smile was genuine, transforming his entire face. He'd already loosened his tie, and she could see he'd run his hands through his hair, a habit she'd noticed when he was thinking hard about something. Damien, we need to talk. The warmth in his expression cooled slightly. That sounds ominous. Someone's been watching us, reporting our interactions to HR. The words tumbled out before she could lose her nerve. Octavia Sterling called me in this afternoon. She knows about the dinner invitation. Damien went very still. When he spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. What exactly did she say? Zero-tolerance policy for romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates. Immediate termination for violations. Imani wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the office's perfect climate control. She made it very clear that my career here depends on maintaining appropriate boundaries. And what did you tell her? That there is no romantic relationship. Something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. Of course. Damien. No, you're right. He stood, moving to the windows that overlooked the city. This was a mistake. I let my personal feelings cloud my professional judgment. The formal tone, the distance in his voice, it felt like a door slamming shut between them. That's not what I meant, isn't it? He turned back to her, and she saw the walls going up in real time. You took the job, Imani. You knew the rules. I knew the rules about work. Nobody told me the rules about... She gestured helplessly between them. This? His voice was carefully neutral, but she caught the slight tension in his shoulders. The way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. The way my name sounds different when you say it. The way you confessed to being lonely and I wanted to... She stopped, realizing she was about to cross a line that would make everything irreversible. Wanted to what? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and danger. Imani took a breath, making a choice that would either save them or destroy them both. I wanted to tell you that you don't have to be lonely anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. Damien stared at her, his grey eyes searching her face as if trying to decode a language he'd never learned. Do you have any idea what you're saying? I'm saying that Octavia Sterling can threaten my job, but she can't threaten how I feel. Imani stepped closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. I'm saying that someone is trying to use the corporate handbook to keep us apart, and maybe that says more about them than it does about us. And I'm saying that I won't let you destroy your career for something that might not even what? Be real. She moved closer still, close enough to see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes. Look at me and tell me this isn't real. He did look at her, really looked at her, and she saw his carefully constructed armor beginning to crack. Imani, tell me you don't think about me when you're alone in this office at midnight. Tell me you didn't text me last night because you wanted to connect with someone who sees past the title. Tell me this is all in my imagination. I can't. The admission was barely a whisper, but it hit her like a thunderclap. Then don't let them win. Before he could respond, her phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it, then felt her blood turn to ice. Having a nice chat. Some conversations are more private than others. Wouldn't want the wrong people to overhear. A friend attached was a photo, grainy, clearly taken from outside the office, but showing her and Damien in what was obviously an intimate conversation. We're not alone, she said, showing him the message. Damien's expression went from vulnerable to dangerous in the space of a heartbeat. Who sent this? I don't know. The number's blocked. She looked around the office, suddenly feeling exposed. But whoever it is has been watching us. Dexter. The name came out like a curse. You think he's behind this. Dexter Vance is ambitious, connected, and resentful that someone he considers beneath him is succeeding where he's not. Damien moved to his desk, his movements sharp with barely controlled anger. His father is Aldrich Vance, senior partner at Vance, Morrison and Associates. They handle legal affairs for half the Fortune 500, so he has resources. He has resources, connections, and a sense of entitlement that makes him dangerous to anyone he perceives as a threat. Damien's jaw tightened, and apparently he perceives you as a threat. Another text arrived. Dinner reservations are so romantic. Would hate for HR to hear about them. Imani stared at the message, feeling trapped between impossible choices. Maybe we should cancel. If someone's watching... No, Damien's voice was firm, final. I won't let some ambitious little prick dictate my personal life. But your reputation, my reputation? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Imani, my reputation is built on being ruthless, calculating, and emotionally unavailable. Maybe it's time for that to change. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. I've spent 18 years building walls around myself. Professional walls, personal walls, walls to keep people at a distance so they couldn't hurt me or use me or disappoint me. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. And then you walked into my life and saw through every single one of them. Damien, I'm tired of being afraid, Imani. Tired of letting fear make my choices for me. His grey eyes were intense, burning with something that made her heart race. If Dexter Vance wants a war, he can have one, but he doesn't get to take this away from us. What if we lose everything? Then we lose it together. The simple words hit her like a physical blow. In all her careful calculations about career advancement and professional success, she'd never considered the possibility that losing everything might be worth it if she wasn't losing it alone. Her phone buzzed again. Such a touching scene. Too bad it's about to be interrupted. This time, the attached photo showed the elevator, the doors opening to reveal Octavia Sterling and two men in security uniforms. They're coming, Imani whispered. Damien glanced at the image, then back at her face. Are you with me? It was more than a question about the next few minutes. It was a question about everything, about choosing him over safety, about risking her career for something that might be love, about standing up to people who wanted to use their power to control her life. Yes, she said, and meant it completely. The sound of footsteps in the hallway grew louder. Damien's hand was still on her face, his thumb still tracing gentle patterns across her skin. Then let's give them something worth talking about. And as the footsteps reached the door, he leaned down and kissed her with 18 years of loneliness and a lifetime of hope. There are moments when time stops, when everything you've built hangs in the balance and when the only choice left is how you want to fall. The kiss lasted exactly 3 seconds, long enough to change everything, not long enough to prepare for what came next. The office door opened with the force of inevitability. Octavia Sterling stepped inside, flanked by 2 security guards, whose presence made the spacious office feel suddenly claustrophobic. Her expression was a masterpiece of professional disapproval, but Imani caught the glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Mr. Cross, Miss Brooks. Octavia's voice was crisp, controlled, deadly. I apologize for the interruption, but we need to discuss a rather urgent matter. Damien didn't step away from Imani immediately. For a heartbeat, his hand remained on her face, his thumb still tracing that gentle pattern across her cheekbone. When he finally moved, it was with the deliberate calm of a man who'd made his choice and wouldn't apologize for it. Octavia, I wasn't expecting you. His voice carried all the authority of someone who owned the building they were standing in. Perhaps you could explain why you felt it necessary to bring security to my private office. There have been allegations of inappropriate conduct that require immediate investigation. Octavia opened the leather portfolio she carried, removing a stack of photographs. These images were provided to HR by a concerned employee. She spread the photos across Damien's desk, like evidence at a crime scene. Imani recognized them immediately. Shots taken through the office windows, grainy but clear enough. Her and Damien talking in the elevator, standing close by the windows. The moment earlier, when his hand had touched her face. Quite compelling, Octavia continued, particularly when combined with eyewitness accounts of intimate conversations, personal text messages, and dinner invitations that clearly violate company policy. Imani felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Damien remained utterly composed. I see. And which employee felt so concerned about my private conversations that they resorted to surveillance? That information is confidential, of course. Of course. Damien's smile was razor-sharp. How convenient. One of the security guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to being present for executive-level confrontations. The other kept his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over Damien's shoulder, professional neutrality written across his features. The company policy is quite clear, Octavia continued. Romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates create liability issues that Cross Holdings cannot tolerate. Miss Brooks will need to be terminated immediately. No. The word came out flat, final, brooking no argument. Octavia's eyebrows rose slightly. I beg your pardon. I said no. Damien moved behind his desk, every inch the CEO now. Miss Brooks will not be terminated. Not today, not ever, and certainly not based on photographs taken by someone skulking around office windows like a common stalker. Mr. Cross, the evidence is quite clear. The evidence shows nothing more than normal professional interactions between an executive and his assistant. Damien's voice was deadly calm. If you see something inappropriate in these images, perhaps that says more about your interpretation than about our conduct. Imani watched the exchange with growing amazement. Damien was protecting her, using his authority like a shield, but she could see the cost in the tension of his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened with each word. There are also reports of personal text messages, Octavia pressed. Dinner invitations that clearly cross professional boundaries. Business dinners are a standard part of executive assistant's duties. Damien picked up one of the photographs, studying it with apparent calm. Unless you're suggesting that Miss Brooks shouldn't perform the full scope of her job responsibilities. It was a masterful deflection, turning Octavia's accusations back on themselves, but Imani could see it wouldn't be enough. Not with Dexter pulling strings behind the scenes, not with someone determined to destroy them both. Perhaps, Octavia said carefully, it would be best if Miss Brooks were transferred to another department to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Absolutely not. This time it was Imani who spoke. Every person in the room turned to look at her, and she felt the weight of their attention like physical pressure. But she'd made her choice in that moment, when Damien had asked if she was with him, and she wasn't backing down now. I'm sorry. Octavia's voice was dangerously quiet. I said absolutely not. Imani stepped forward, her chin raised. I won't be transferred, reassigned or terminated based on someone else's interpretation of my professional relationships. Miss Brooks, you're hardly in a position to make demands. Actually, I am. Imani's voice was steady, drawing strength from some well she hadn't known existed. Because I haven't violated any company policies. I've done my job, I've done it well, and I won't be punished for someone else's assumptions. Octavia's smile was arctic. Very well. Then perhaps we should discuss this matter in a more formal setting, with legal representation present. Excellent idea. The new voice came from the doorway, where Lysander Thorne stood leaning against the frame with casual elegance. His British accent seemed more pronounced than usual, and his expression was one of polite interest that didn't quite hide the steel beneath. Lysander. Damien's relief was carefully controlled, but Imani caught it. I wasn't expecting you. Emergency board meeting, old boy. Something about acquisition timelines. Lysander's gaze swept the room, taking in the security guards, the photographs, the tension crackling in the air. Though it seems I've walked into something rather more interesting. This is a private personnel matter, Octavia said sharply. Is it? Lysander straightened, his casual demeanor shifting into something more authoritative. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like harassment of key personnel based on unsubstantiated allegations. The allegations are quite substantiated. Are they? Lysander moved into the room, his presence somehow making the space feel less oppressive. Because I see surveillance photographs taken without consent, accusations based on normal professional interactions, and what appears to be a coordinated effort to damage the reputation of Cross Holdings' most effective executive team. He paused, his smile becoming predatory. Tell me, Ms. Sterling, who exactly provided these photographs? Because unauthorized surveillance of corporate executives could be considered industrial espionage, couldn't it? Octavia's composure cracked slightly. The source is a concerned employee. The source is Dexter Vance. Everyone turned to stare at Imani. She felt her heart hammering against her ribs, but she pressed on. He's been watching us, taking photographs, feeding information to HR. He told me himself that he wanted to give me friendly advice about navigating office politics. She looked directly at Octavia. You want to talk about inappropriate conduct? Maybe you should investigate who's been stalking employees and using corporate policy as a weapon. The silence that followed was deafening. One of the security guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly wondering why he was still there. The other maintained his professional neutrality, though Imani caught him glancing toward the door, as if calculating escape routes. These are serious accusations, Miss Brooks, Octavia said carefully. Yes, they are. Damien's voice cut through the tension like a blade. And they raise some interesting questions about how this investigation began, who's been feeding you information, and whether HR has been used as a tool for personal vendettas. Lysander cleared his throat delicately. I do believe this matter has moved beyond the scope of personnel management. Perhaps it's time to involve the legal department. I think, Octavia said tightly, that would be premature. Do you? Lysander's smile was all teeth. Because Cross Holdings takes employee harassment very seriously. Whether that harassment comes from fellow employees or from HR personnel acting on false information. The threat was elegantly delivered, but unmistakable. Octavia gathered her photographs with sharp, precise movements, her professional mask slipping to reveal the anger beneath. This matter isn't closed, she said, looking between Damien and Imani. The board will be informed of these irregularities. I'm sure they will be, Damien replied smoothly, along with information about unauthorized surveillance and misuse of HR resources. After Octavia and the security guards left, the office felt simultaneously larger and more intimate. Lysander moved to Damien's bar cart, helping himself to what looked like very expensive whiskey. Well, he said cheerfully, that was refreshing. It's been ages since I've seen Octavia Sterling look actually rattled. Thank you, Imani said quietly, for intervening. Think nothing of it, darling. I've been looking for an excuse to put that woman in her place for months. He raised his glass in a mock toast, though I do have one question. Which is, are you two actually sleeping together, or are we fighting this war over principle alone? The blunt question hung in the air. Imani felt heat rise in her cheeks, but before she could respond, Damien answered, We're not sleeping together. Pity, Lysander said cheerfully, would make the fight more interesting. But as his eyes met Imani's across the room, both of them knew that everything had changed, and there was no going back to the safety of professional distance. Victory in one battle only means the war is about to get more dangerous. The restaurant was the kind of place where reservations were made months in advance, and paparazzi lingered outside, hoping to catch glimpses of celebrities and power brokers. Imani had never imagined herself in such a setting, yet here she was, sitting across from Damien Cross in a corner booth that afforded them privacy while still putting them on display. You realize, Damien said, cutting into his perfectly prepared salmon, that by coming here we're basically declaring war on everyone who wants us to fail. Good. Imani surprised herself with the vehemence in her voice. I'm tired of hiding, tired of apologizing for feelings I didn't choose and don't want to change. 3 days had passed since the confrontation with Octavia Sterling. 3 days of whispered conversations, sideways glances, and a tension that seemed to permeate every floor of Cross Holdings. The building itself felt like a battlefield, with loyalties being tested and alliances being formed in conference rooms and break areas. Lysander thinks we should be more strategic, Damien continued. Keep things professional until the board investigation concludes. And what do you think? He looked up from his meal, those steel-grey eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. I think I've spent 40 years being strategic, playing it safe, calculating every move to minimize risk. He paused, his voice dropping to something softer, more intimate. And I'm tired of it. The admission hung between them like a bridge. Neither of them had been sure they were ready to cross. Around them, the restaurant hummed with the quiet conversations of people who shaped markets and toppled governments over dessert. But in their corner booth, the world felt smaller, more personal, more real. There's something else, Imani said, pulling her phone from her purse. I got another message today. She showed him the screen. Enjoying dinner. Such a lovely couple. Would hate for your mother to see these photos, or your father's medical bills to become complicated. Damien's expression went from warm to dangerous in the space of a heartbeat. He's threatening your family now. Dexter's desperate, which makes him unpredictable. Imani put her phone away, trying to ignore the ice in her veins. My mother doesn't know about any of this. She thinks I'm still just an intern filing reports and making coffee. What does she know about your father's condition? Heart attack 6 months ago. He can't work anymore, and the insurance, it's complicated. She looked down at her untouched wine, the admission feeling like failure. The medical bills are part of why this job means so much to me, why I can't afford to lose it. Damien was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the white tablecloth. Dexter doesn't know about your salary increase, does he? No, why? Because if he did, he'd realize that threatening your family's financial security is pointless now. You make enough to handle your father's medical expenses regardless of insurance complications. The simple statement, hit her like a revelation. In all the chaos and conflict, she'd forgotten that her life had fundamentally changed. She wasn't the desperate intern clinging to an unpaid position anymore. She was Damien Cross's personal assistant, with a salary that could solve problems she'd been losing sleep over for months. "I keep forgetting," she admitted, "that things are different now. Everything is different now." The way he said it made her look up, and she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. There was intensity there, yes, but also something vulnerable, something that made her heart speed up, despite the elegant restaurant, the watching eyes, the weight of their professional complications. "Damien, I have a confession to make." He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That night at the company party, when I pretended to be drunk, I wasn't testing everyone to see who would help me. No? I was testing you specifically." His grey eyes never left hers. "I'd been watching you for weeks. The way you worked, the way you treated people, the way you carried yourself with dignity even when others tried to diminish you. And I wanted to know if you were as genuine as you seemed." The confession sent heat coursing through her veins. "You were watching me? Every day. The way you arrived early and stayed late. The way you helped other interns even when they didn't deserve it. The way you stood up to Connor Holbrook without losing your composure." He paused, something raw flickering across his features. "The way you made me want to be worthy of the kindness you showed everyone around you. You already were worthy. Was I? Am I?" The questions were quiet, uncertain in a way that made her chest ache. "I've spent so many years being the ruthless CEO, the brilliant strategist, the man who wins at any cost. But with you, I want to be someone different, someone better." Before she could respond, their waiter appeared with practiced discretion, refilling water glasses and checking on their meals with the kind of professional invisibility that expensive restaurants perfected. The interruption gave Imani a moment to process what Damien had just revealed. Not just that he'd been watching her, but that she'd made him want to change, to grow, to become someone worthy of the connection growing between them. "What if we can't be both?" she asked after the waiter departed. "What if we can't be successful professionally and honest about this personally? Then we choose." The simple statement carried the weight of everything they were risking. "Just like that? Just like that." He reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. "I've spent 18 years building Cross Holdings into an empire, but what's the point of ruling the world if you're alone at the top?" His thumb traced patterns across her knuckles, the simple touch sending electricity up her arm. "I choose you, Imani, whatever the cost, even if it means losing everything, especially if it means losing everything." His smile was soft, genuine, transforming his entire face. "Because I've had everything and I've been miserable. But these past few weeks, working beside you, laughing with you, watching you navigate this world with grace and strength, I've been happy, actually happy." The admission hung between them like a promise, like a vow, like the beginning of something that couldn't be undone. Imani felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness but from the overwhelming recognition that she was sitting across from someone who saw her, really saw her, and chose her anyway. "I choose you too," she whispered. Their hands were still linked across the table when Imani noticed the flash of a camera from somewhere across the restaurant. Then another, and another. "We're being photographed," she said quietly. Damien didn't turn around, didn't release her hand, didn't show any sign of concern. "I know. That doesn't bother you. Tomorrow those photos will be on Dexter's desk, probably forwarded to the board of directors, along with whatever narrative he's constructed about our relationship." His thumb continued its gentle pattern across her skin. "But tonight, I'm having dinner with the most remarkable woman I've ever met, and she just told me she chooses me. So no, it doesn't bother me." He lifted their joined hands, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that made her breath catch. "Let them take pictures, let them whisper, let them judge." His grey eyes met hers, burning with intensity. "We know the truth." As they left the restaurant an hour later, paparazzi cameras flashed from the shadows. By morning, those images would be on gossip blogs and social media feeds, analyzed and dissected by people who knew nothing about the journey that had brought them to this moment. But as Damien helped her into the car, his hand warm and steady on hers, Imani realized she didn't care. Let the whole world see. She was tired of hiding, tired of apologizing, tired of being ashamed of something that felt more real than anything she'd ever experienced. Tomorrow would bring consequences, but tonight belonged to them. Some mornings arrive with the gentle promise of new beginnings. Others come like a hurricane, stripping away everything you thought was safe. Imani knew it was going to be a devastating day the moment she stepped into the Cross Holdings lobby at 7:15 a.m. The usual morning energy was replaced by an electric tension that made her skin prickle. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when she walked by. Phones were hastily tucked away. Even the security guards at the front desk watched her with barely concealed curiosity. By the time she reached the 40th floor, her heart was hammering against her ribs. Her desk was exactly as she'd left it the night before, but the atmosphere around it had changed. The intern bullpen was quieter than usual, though she could feel dozens of eyes tracking her every movement. Wesley Hartwell caught her attention from across the floor, giving her a subtle thumbs up that provided a small measure of comfort in the hostile landscape. Her computer screen displayed 17 unread emails, 12 missed calls, and 43 text messages. But before she could process any of them, Lysander Thorne appeared at her desk, his usually cheerful demeanor replaced by something grimmer. "Darling, we need to talk. Now." He led her to an empty conference room, closing the door with deliberate care before turning to face her with an expression she'd never seen from him before. Protective, angry, and slightly dangerous. "The board meeting has been moved up to 9 a.m. emergency session." He moved to the windows, his hands clasped behind his back. Apparently, some rather compelling evidence was presented to them early this morning. How compelling? Instead of answering, he placed a tablet on the conference table. The screen showed a gossip website, Manhattan Elite Daily, with a headline that made her stomach plummet. Cross Holdings CEO's secret romance, power, passion, and corporate scandal. Below the headline were photos from the restaurant. High-resolution, perfectly timed shots that captured every intimate moment. Damien helping her into her chair, their hands linked across the table. The moment he'd kissed her knuckles, her face glowing with happiness and completely recognizable. "There are 12 more sites with similar coverage," Lysander said quietly. "Financial blogs, social media, industry publications. Someone had these photos distributed simultaneously across multiple platforms for maximum impact." Imani sank into a chair, the tablet trembling in her hands as she scrolled through article after article. The commentary ranged from speculative to vicious, with particular attention paid to her background, her age, and the suspicious timing of her rapid promotion. "They're calling me a gold digger," she whispered, reading one particularly brutal analysis of her motivations. "They're calling you worse things than that." Lysander's voice was tight with controlled fury. "But that's not the real problem." "What's the real problem?" "The board is meeting to discuss Damien's removal as CEO." The words hit her like a physical blow. They can't do that, can they? The CEO serves at the pleasure of the board of directors. If they determine that his personal conduct is damaging to the company's reputation or creating legal liabilities, Lysander's expression was grim. They absolutely can do that. Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered, "Imani Brooks." "Miss Brooks, this is Cordelia Ashworth." The voice was crisp, professional, with an undertone that made Imani's skin crawl. "I believe we need to have a conversation." "About what?" "About your future, and Damien's." There was a pause, calculated and deliberate. "I'm prepared to offer you a very generous severance package in exchange for your resignation, enough to handle your father's medical expenses and provide comfortable living for several years." The offer was a lifeline and a trap all at once. What's the catch? No catch. Simply a recognition that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is step away before we cause irreparable damage to someone we care about. Imani felt ice form in her veins. "You're asking me to abandon him. I'm asking you to save him." Cordelia's voice was almost gentle now, which made it infinitely more dangerous. "The board is meeting in 90 minutes to discuss his removal. Your continued presence as his assistant, and whatever personal relationship may exist between you, will be cited as evidence of his poor judgment and unsuitability for leadership. And if I resign?" "If you resign, citing personal reasons and a desire to pursue other opportunities, the board will likely consider that sufficient evidence that Damien has recognized the inappropriateness of the situation and taken corrective action." The trap was elegant in its simplicity. Stay and watch Damien lose everything he'd built. Leave and save his career while destroying any chance they had at happiness together. "How long do I have to decide?" "The board meeting starts in 90 minutes. Your resignation would need to be submitted before then to have any impact on their deliberations." The line went dead, leaving Imani staring at her phone with growing despair. Lysander was watching her with an expression of sympathy that made everything worse. "Cordelia," he asked. "She's offering me money to resign. Says it's the only way to save Damien's position. And what do you want to do?" Before she could answer, the conference room door opened to reveal Damien himself. He looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept, but his eyes immediately found hers with an intensity that made her chest ache. "I've been looking for you." He moved toward her, his hands reaching for hers with desperate familiarity. "Are you all right? Am I all right?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended. "Damien, they're trying to remove you as CEO. Because of me." "I know. You know?" She pulled back, studying his face. "How long have you known?" "Lysander called me at 5 a.m. I've spent the past 2 hours with our legal team, preparing for the board meeting." His grey eyes were steady, determined. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "What if we don't have to?" The question hung in the air between them. Damien's expression shifted, becoming wary. "What do you mean?" "Cordelia offered me a deal. If I resign citing personal reasons, the board might reconsider your removal." "Absolutely not. Damien, listen." "No, you listen." His voice carried all the authority of someone who'd built an empire from nothing, but underneath it she heard something raw, almost desperate. "I won't let them use you as a sacrifice to save my position. I won't let you destroy your career to protect mine." "What career?" The words came out bitter, frustrated. "Look at me, Damien. Really look at me. I'm 24 years old with a degree from a state school and no connections. This job was a miracle, and we both know it. Without you, I'm nobody. That's not true, isn't it?" She gestured toward the tablet with its brutal headlines and vicious commentary. "They're already calling me a gold digger, a social climber, a girl who slept her way to the top. And maybe they're right." The silence that followed was deafening. Lysander cleared his throat uncomfortably, but neither Damien nor Imani looked away from each other. "Do you really believe that?" Damien's voice was quiet, hurt. "I don't know what I believe anymore." The admission came out broken, exhausted. "I just know that I can't be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. And I can't be the reason you lose faith in yourself." He moved closer, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "Listen to me, Imani Brooks. You are brilliant. You are capable. You are strong enough to build your own empire if you want to. This job, this opportunity, you earned it. Not because of me, not because of any favor or special consideration, but because you're exceptional. Damien, I love you." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples that changed everything. Lysander made a small sound of surprise, but Imani barely heard him over the rushing in her ears. "I love you," Damien repeated, his thumb tracing across her cheekbone with familiar tenderness. "And I won't let them take that away from us. Not the board, not Dexter Vance, not anyone. Even if it costs you everything? Especially if it costs me everything." His smile was soft, genuine, transforming his entire face. "Because what's the point of having everything if I don't have you?" And in that moment, with 90 minutes until the board meeting that could destroy them both, Imani realized that sometimes love means choosing to fight rather than choosing to run. When everything you've built is crumbling around you, the only choice left is whether to fall alone or stand together. The Cross Holdings boardroom was a temple to corporate power: polished mahogany, leather chairs that cost more than most people's cars, and windows that offered a commanding view of Manhattan's financial district. At exactly 9 a.m., 12 of the most powerful people in American business filed in, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile to carefully neutral. Imani sat outside in the executive assistance area, her hands folded in her lap, trying to project calm while her heart hammered against her ribs. Through the frosted glass doors, she could see silhouettes moving, taking their positions for what might be the final battle. Damien had insisted she wait outside. "This is about me," he'd said, "about my decisions, my leadership, my choices. I won't let them turn you into a spectacle." But she knew better. This wasn't about leadership or corporate governance. This was about power, control, and the fear that someone might dare to be human in a world that demanded machine-like perfection. At 9:03 a.m., Dexter Vance emerged from the elevator, looking immaculate in a navy suit that screamed family money. He carried a leather portfolio and wore the expression of someone who knew he was about to win. When he saw Imani, his smile was razor-sharp. "Still here?" he asked, pausing at her desk. "How admirable. Most people would have run by now." "I'm not most people." "No, you're not." His gaze swept over her with obvious distaste. "You're the intern who forgot her place and thought she could play in the big leagues." I earned my place here. Did you? He leaned against her desk, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you spread your legs for the right man and called it career advancement. The words hit her like a slap, but Imani didn't flinch. Instead, she stood, drawing herself to her full height and looked Dexter directly in the eyes. You're pathetic, she said quietly. You have every advantage. Money, connections, privilege handed to you on a silver platter, and you're still so insecure that you have to destroy other people to feel important. Dexter's confident facade cracked slightly. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Actually, I do. You're the sad little boy who can't stand that someone earned what you think you deserved. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. And when this is over, when you've destroyed everything you can reach, you'll still be exactly what you are right now. Mediocre. For a moment, genuine fury flickered across Dexter's features. Then the boardroom doors opened, and Cordelia Ashworth emerged. Miss Brooks, Mr. Vance, the board would like to speak with you both. The boardroom felt like a courtroom as Imani entered. 12 faces turned to study her, some curious, some hostile, some carefully neutral. At the head of the table sat Harcourt Blackstone, the board chairman, a man in his 70s with silver hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent decades making decisions that affected millions of lives. Damien stood at the far end of the room, his expression carefully controlled, but his eyes finding hers immediately. In that brief glance she saw everything: love, fear, determination, and something that looked like goodbye. Miss Brooks, Harcourt's voice was cultured, precise. Thank you for joining us. Please, take a seat. There were 2 empty chairs facing the board, one for her, one for Dexter. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. We're here, Harcourt continued, to address concerns that have been raised about Mr. Cross's professional conduct and its potential impact on Cross Holdings' reputation and legal standing. He gestured toward a large screen that dominated one wall. With the press of a button, it filled with images, screenshots from gossip websites, photos from the restaurant, social media posts with thousands of comments. As you can see, Mr. Cross's personal relationship with his assistant has become a matter of public interest. The board's concern is not with Mr. Cross's private life, but with the potential liability this relationship creates for the company. Dexter cleared his throat. If I may, Mr. Blackstone, I think it's important to establish the timeline of this relationship. When did it begin? Was Miss Brooks given preferential treatment? Were there any quid pro quo arrangements that could expose the company to harassment lawsuits? The questions were expertly crafted, designed to paint Imani as either a victim or a manipulator. Either way, someone who didn't belong in the room. Mr. Vance raises valid concerns, Cordelia added smoothly. Perhaps Miss Brooks could help us understand how a junior intern was promoted to such a sensitive position so quickly. All eyes turned to Imani. This was the moment she'd been dreading. The moment when she would have to defend not just her professional qualifications, but her very right to exist in this space. She stood slowly, her hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. You want to know how I got this job? Her voice was quiet but carried clearly through the room. I got it because I saw Damien Cross as a human being instead of just a title. Murmurs rippled through the room, but she continued. The night of the company party, when everyone else saw an opportunity to network or gossip or advance their careers, I saw someone who needed help. Not because he was drunk, he wasn't, but because he was testing whether anyone in this building would choose kindness over ambition. She looked directly at Harcourt. You want to talk about liability? The real liability is a culture that punishes people for caring about each other. That treats human connection as a weakness to be exploited rather than a strength to be celebrated. Miss Brooks, Cordelia interrupted, while your sentiments are admirable, I'm not finished. The authority in Imani's voice surprised everyone, including herself. You want to know about my qualifications? I graduated summa cum laude with a double major. I've increased departmental efficiency by 30% in my time here. I've caught errors that would have cost the company millions, facilitated deals worth hundreds of millions more, and earned the respect of clients who specifically request to work with me. She turned to face Dexter. But none of that matters to you, does it? Because I committed the unforgivable sin of being successful while black, female, and from Brooklyn. That's hardly fair, Dexter began. Fair? Imani laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about fair? You've been stalking me for weeks, taking photographs, spreading rumors, trying to destroy my career because you can't stand that I earned something you think you deserved. And now you're sitting in a boardroom full of people who've known your father since you were in diapers, pretending this is about corporate policy instead of your wounded ego." The room was dead silent. Even Harcourt seemed taken aback by her directness. "The truth is," Imani continued, "Damien Cross fell in love with me not because I'm his assistant, but despite it. And I fell in love with him not because he's a billionaire, but because he's the first person in my professional life who saw me as an equal rather than a threat." She moved to stand beside Damien, taking his hand in front of the entire board. "You want me to resign to protect his reputation, fine. But know this, you're not protecting Cross Holdings from a scandal. You're perpetuating a system that punishes people for being human, that treats love as a liability and connection as corruption." Harcourt leaned back in his chair, studying them both. "Mr. Cross, do you have anything to add?" Damien squeezed Imani's hand, then stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice carried all the authority of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. 18 years ago, I founded this company with a simple philosophy, that businesses succeed when they're led by people who understand that profit and humanity aren't mutually exclusive." He looked around the room, meeting each board member's eyes. "Today, you're asking me to choose between the woman I love and the company I built. And while that choice would have been impossible 6 months ago, it's remarkably easy now." He turned to Imani, his grey eyes soft with something that took her breath away. "I choose her. I choose us. I choose a future where success includes the possibility of happiness, where power includes the freedom to love, where building something meaningful doesn't require sacrificing everything that makes life worth living." He turned back to the board. "If that's incompatible with your vision for Cross Holdings, then perhaps it's time for new leadership." The silence that followed was deafening. 12 of the most powerful people in American business sat staring at a man who'd just chosen love over empire, personal happiness over professional achievement. Finally, Harcourt spoke. "Mr. Cross, Miss Brooks, would you please step outside while the board deliberates?" As they left the boardroom, Imani felt simultaneously triumphant and terrified. They'd told their truth, defended their love, stood together against the forces trying to tear them apart. But they'd also probably just destroyed both their careers in the process. In the hallway, Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her close enough that she could feel his heartbeat against her cheek. "Whatever happens," he whispered, "I'm proud of you, proud of us. Even if we lose everything, especially if we lose everything." His lips found hers in a kiss that tasted like goodbye and hello and forever all at once. "Because we'll lose it together." And as they waited for the board's decision, Imani realized that sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning, it's choosing what's worth fighting for. 2 years later, some stories end with perfect closure, neat conclusions that tie every loose thread into a pristine bow. But the best stories, the ones that change you, end with new beginnings. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse office, casting golden light across the mahogany desk where Imani Brooks sat reviewing quarterly projections. The nameplate beside her computer read, "Chief Operating Officer," in elegant script, but it was the smaller frame next to it that made her smile. A photo of her and Damien from their engagement party, both of them laughing at something Lysander had whispered moments before the camera clicked. 2 years. It felt like a lifetime and an instant all at once. The boardroom confrontation had lasted 4 hours, 4 hours of deliberation, debate, and what Lysander later described as the most entertaining corporate drama in decades. When they'd finally emerged, Harcourt Blackstone had delivered the verdict with the solemnity of a judge pronouncing sentence. Damien would remain as CEO, but with conditions. A formal review of company policies regarding workplace relationships, mandatory sensitivity training for all executives, and a commitment to transparency that included regular board oversight of all major personnel decisions. "The board recognizes," Harcourt had said, "that times are changing. What we won't tolerate is secrecy, manipulation, or the abuse of power. What we will support is honesty, merit-based advancement, and the recognition that successful businesses are built by human beings, not machines." Dexter Vance had been asked to submit his resignation the following Monday. The official statement cited philosophical differences with company values, but everyone knew the truth. His father's legal firm had quietly ended their contract with Cross Holdings 3 weeks later. Octavia Sterling had lasted another 6 months, before finding a better opportunity with a company that appreciated her particular management style. Her replacement, Thaddeus Mills, had implemented policies that protected employees from harassment while promoting genuine professional development. But the most significant changes hadn't happened in board meetings or policy manuals. They'd happened in the quiet moments. The way Damien's hand found hers during late-night strategy sessions, the way he'd started leaving the office at reasonable hours, the way he'd learned to laugh at Lysander's terrible jokes without calculating their business implications, and the way he'd asked her to marry him, not in some grand, theatrical gesture designed for social media or corporate PR, but on a Tuesday night in her tiny Brooklyn apartment, while they shared Chinese takeout and argued about whether the Meridian acquisition was worth the regulatory headaches. He'd simply reached across her scratched coffee table, taken her hand and said, "Marry me, Imani, not because it makes business sense or because it will look good in the trades. Marry me because I can't imagine building anything meaningful without you beside me." She'd said yes before he'd finished the sentence. The wedding had been small, private, held in her parents' backyard in Brooklyn. Her father, recovered now, thanks to the excellent insurance that came with her COO position, had walked her down an aisle made of rose petals and fairy lights. Lysander had served as Damien's best man, delivering a speech that had made half the guests cry and the other half question his sobriety. The business press had covered it, of course, but the headlines were different now. Cross Holdings power couple celebrates Brooklyn wedding, and from intern to COO, the Imani Brooks success story. The narrative had shifted from scandal to inspiration, from cautionary tale to modern fairy tale. Her phone buzzed with an internal call, interrupting her thoughts. Imani Brooks Cross. "Mrs. Cross, your 10 a.m. is here." The voice belonged to Paisley Chen, her own assistant, a brilliant recent graduate from Columbia who reminded Imani of herself 2 years ago, ambitious, determined, and slightly intimidated by the corporate machinery she was learning to navigate. "Send them in, please." The door opened to reveal Cordelia Ashworth, looking as polished and formidable as ever, but there was something different in her expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "Cordelia." Imani stood, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming. Mrs. Cross, or do you prefer COO Brooks Cross?" Cordelia's smile was genuine now, warm in a way it had never been during their previous encounters. "Imani is fine." They settled into the comfortable chairs by the window, the same spot where Imani had once sat as Damien's assistant, frantically taking notes and trying not to embarrass herself. The symmetry wasn't lost on either of them. "I have to admit," Cordelia said, "when I made that phone call 2 years ago, I never expected to be sitting here asking for your help. Times change." "Indeed they do." Cordelia opened her portfolio, removing a thick document. "Venture Dynamics is restructuring our entire approach to workplace culture and employee advancement. We need someone who understands both the human and business elements of organizational change." Imani glanced at the consulting contract, noting the substantial fee attached. "This is generous. You're worth it. What you and Damien accomplished here, the culture shift, the policy changes, the way you've maintained profitability while prioritizing employee welfare, it's exactly what we need." "And what makes you think I'm interested in consulting work?" Cordelia's smile became knowing. "Because brilliant people don't stay contained within single organizations forever. You've learned everything Cross Holdings can teach you. Now you're ready to teach others." Before Imani could respond, there was a soft knock on her door. Damien entered, looking every inch the successful CEO, but with an ease in his posture that hadn't been there 2 years ago. "Sorry to interrupt." Lysander's online one with updates from the Singapore office. His eyes met hers across the room, and she saw the same warmth there that had sustained them through boardroom battles and late-night strategy sessions and the 1,000 small moments that had built their life together. "Tell him I'll call him back in 10 minutes. "Will do." He started to leave, then paused. "Oh, and your mother called. She wants to know if we're still coming for Sunday dinner." "Of course we are. It's her birthday." "I know. I already had Paisley order the flowers." He smiled, that genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "I love you." "I love you too." After he left, Cordelia shook her head with something that looked like wonder. "You know, I've known Damien Cross for 15 years. I've seen him negotiate billion-dollar deals, navigate hostile takeovers, rebuild entire market sectors, but I've never seen him look at anything the way he looks at you." "How does he look at me?" "Like your home." The simple observation hit Imani with unexpected force. Home, not the penthouse apartment they shared in Manhattan, Not the Brooklyn house they'd bought near her parents, but something deeper. The sense of belonging, of being known, of being chosen every day by someone who saw all your flaws and complexities and decided you were worth fighting for anyway. "The consulting offer," she said finally. "I'll need to discuss it with Damien, but I'm interested." "Excellent, take your time. Good partnerships are worth the wait." After Cordelia left, Imani sat alone in her office, looking out at the city that had once seemed impossibly vast and intimidating. 2 years ago, she'd been a desperate intern with more ambition than opportunity, more dreams than realistic expectations. Now she was the COO of one of America's most successful companies, married to a man who'd chosen love over empire, building something that mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lysander. "Dinner tonight? Celebrating the Singapore deal? Plus I have gossip about Dexter's latest career disaster. L." She typed back, "Can't wait. The usual place? Naturally. Though I still think we should upgrade to somewhere that doesn't serve wine in coffee mugs. We're respectable now, darling." "Respectability is overrated," she replied. "See you at 7. As the day wound down and the office emptied, Damien appeared in her doorway, jacket slung over his shoulder, tie loosened, looking like the man who'd first caught her attention in a crowded party by pretending to be vulnerable. "Ready to go home?" She saved her work, closed her laptop and moved toward him. But instead of heading straight for the elevator, she detoured to the windows that overlooked Manhattan. The city spread out below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, millions of dreams being pursued in the growing darkness. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "The simplicity of when we were just CEO and assistant?" Damien moved behind her, his arms circling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Never. Not even a little? When things were less complicated?" "Things were never less complicated, love. We just pretended they were." His voice was soft against her ear. "Besides, I like complicated. Complicated means real. Complicated means worth fighting for." She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat through his shirt. "Cordelia offered me a consulting contract today." "Interesting. Are you considering it? Maybe it would mean travel, building something new, taking risks." "Sounds terrifying." She could hear the smile in his voice. "When do we start?" The casual assumption that they would face new challenges together, that success meant partnership rather than individual achievement, still surprised her sometimes. But it was the foundation everything else was built on, the certainty that whatever came next, they would navigate it together. "I love you, Damien Cross." "And I love you, Imani Brooks Cross." He turned her in his arms, his grey eyes reflecting the city lights. "Ready for the next adventure?" She thought about the consulting contract, the new challenges it would bring, the risks and opportunities that lay ahead. Then she looked at the man who'd chosen her over everything else he'd built, who'd taught her that love wasn't a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be celebrated. "With you, always." As they left Cross Holdings that evening, walking hand in hand toward the future they were building together, neither of them looked back. The building would be there tomorrow, with its boardrooms and office politics and endless meetings. But tonight belonged to them, to Sunday dinners with her parents, to terrible wine in coffee mugs with Lysander, to the 1,000 small moments that make a marriage, a partnership, a life worth living. Some love stories end with grand gestures and dramatic declarations. But the best ones, the ones that last, end with the quiet recognition that love isn't a destination you arrive at, but a choice you make every day. And every day, without hesitation, they chose each other. What would you do if you had to choose between your career and the love of your life? Have you ever had to fight for something everyone else thought was impossible? Your participation in the channel is very important, so please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.